The free fall in relations between the world's two top economies, U.S. President Donald Trump sought a forced sale of TikTok. Last month, the U.S. abruptly ordered China to close its consulate in Houston. It seems everywhere you turn, bilateral relations are in a sorry state. Chinese ambassador to the United States, Cui Tiankai, recently said relations were indeed at the lowest point in nearly half a century between the two countries. So, can China and the U.S. get past the insult and the rhetoric and find common ground? Earlier, I spoke to Max Baucus, the 11th U.S. ambassador to China from the year 2014 to 2017. With his decades of experience in U.S. political arena and his past communications with China, what's his assessment of the bilateral ties? Let's listen to his words. What do you think could be the worst scenario as we go toward the presidential election in your country?
It's possible, although I think unlikely, that the United States government will ratchet up even more pressure against China. President Trump has already revoked the special status for Hong Kong, and also is working toward potential additional sanctions on Chinese officials with respect to alleged human rights violations in Xinjiang, as well as violations in Hong Kong. Then after that, there's restrictions on Huawei and companies who are selling products to Huawei and Huawei suppliers. So it could get worse. I think it's unlikely, though, because if it goes too far, then it's going to make it very difficult for normalcy to recur after the election.
We have noticed that now in the U.S. society, even some people trying to spread the conspiracy that 5G could contain coronavirus. That when you have a app trying to do the tracking of coronavirus spread, that app could have conspiracy theories involved. How would China be able to persuade the American people?
Well, I think the United States has been way too hypercritical in its criticism of China. This is a political season in the United States. President Trump running for re-election, members of the Senate and Congress running for re-election, and they're using China as a scapegoat, as a whipping boy to help them get elected. It's very easy to criticize. It's very hard to be more constructive. But I do think, frankly, that we are reaching obviously a very low point in the relationship. And the only solution out of this thing is for both countries to be much more transparent, put everything on the table. It'll take a long time, but slowly but surely, if there's good faith, there has to be good faith on both sides, and that'll help a little bit.
However, if you look at the reality that the current administration is trying to decouple, quote unquote, from China, ASAP, as long as it serves its political agenda for the election. So do you think a mechanism, as you just mentioned, could really be established?
Well, nothing can be done before the election. The situation is just too toxic. It's just impossible to have any meaningful action before the elections in the United States. Then after the United States, frankly, it's going to take a very solid administration, whether it's Trump or Biden, to say, okay, we've got to deal with China. We have to deal with it as grown-ups, as adults. China's not going anywhere. China's always going to be there. China is growing. It's strong. We have to find a way to accommodate China. Not in this superficial sense, not in this subservient sense, but to deal with China in a realistic sense, where we both self-respect each other. And we have to start setting lines, which we describe privately to each other, not publicly. We're way too public in our criticism of China.
Chinese State Councilor, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, proposed 3 possibilities. One is things that the U.S. and China can cooperate on. Second, U.S. and China can dialogue about. Third, U.S. and China can manage and control the risks. He suggests to put all the issues between China and the United States to these 3 columns so that the two sides will be having a clearer mind and now to mix everything together and come up with the solutions to every one of them. from your perspective, what is the way to control the damage?
For Mr. Wang, yes, a good idea. I know him. He's a very reasonable person. I always like working with him. It's a very good approach. And I think if he continues with that approach, continues suggesting that approach, and also if the Chinese government is a little more transparent, it is explaining in more detail what it's doing and showing that it wants to work. For example, if it were to back off and not ram trawlers in the South China Sea, if it would work with the Philippines, work with Vietnam, work with Brunei, work with the other claimants in the area, that would help a lot. And also with respect to cyber, show that, say, Huawei or ZTE or other Chinese companies, the technology and the software is there for everybody to see, and the Chinese government and the companies will work with Western countries, including Great Britain and the United States, so those countries understand that those countries need not worry about espionage in their countries, but they have to show. China has to show, not just say.
On some of the points you just mentioned, may I provide more information? Huawei, for example, even a few months ago, already suggested by its founder, Ren Zhengfei, that Huawei is willing to open its system. So it seems that many of the fronts that you've been trying to suggest, China has already been trying to cover in terms of transparency. Having said that, though, Mr. Ambassador, if I could turn the table and ask you whether U.S. has shown its transparency and whether U.S. is willing to work with China at all, or already see China as the opponent, and no matter what one party, for example, China does, it will always fall into whatever category the U.S. designed as the enemy.
Well, it's a very good question. In fact, especially in this administration, just to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to any effort to try to work out some accommodation. So Republicans and Democrats both. It's very toxic. Well, to answer your question, really depends on what we see after the elections. Full disclosure, I'm supporting Joe Biden, and if he is elected president, my judgment is that it'll be less toxic. It'll be less heated in its rhetoric and criticism of China. It'll be more rational. Now, still, China is a big foreign power. It's a rising country. Many Americans are concerned about China, and so China's in that new atmosphere. It's going to have to show it is being more transparent. You suggested about Huawei showing us no open door. That's great. There has to be more of that. And if there is more of that, you'll see that the attitude in the United States, especially after the election, and most especially if Biden's elected, will be more willing to listen to factual presentations by China. But again, I go back to deeds. It's actions that count even more than words. Both sides. But we have to work on that.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, I know when you were in China, you were extremely passionate about that. And also, even you retired from the ambassadorial position, you also have been working consistently, even with your family members, on that. That is, the people-to-people exchanges and relations between China and the United States. You traveled most of the provinces in China. But, Mr. Ambassador, I am afraid I have to report to you the very fabric of that most important relation between China and the United States now is being damaged because of an earlier order coming from the current administration about punishing international students. 30% of them could be Chinese students. Though they rescind their decision, but the soup is already becoming spoiled.
It's true. I have to correct you a little bit. I did travel. I did go to every single province.
Okay, good for you, sir.
Yeah, and I loved it. It was a great job because I really like the Chinese people, and the reward of working on the relationship U.S. China to help get it right was wonderful. It was a great reward. But fortunately, the administration did rescind that decision about online courses in U.S. universities, and therefore it's not as draconian toward Chinese students as before. But part of the problem, too, is not very many Americans have been to China. Americans really don't understand China. I wonder how much time Secretary of State Pompeo was personally spent in China other than his official capacity. U.S. officials do not know China very well. They've not spent much time in China at all. The only ones that have are the people in the think tanks, the academics. They've been to China time to time, but too few members of Congress, too few members of the United States government have been to China. You got to go to see, taste it, smell it, feel it, understand what it is, and then realize that Chinese people are very similar to American people, have the same hopes and desires. They want to have food on the table, take care of their kids, good education for their kids, decent health care, decent, air and water not polluted. We're basically the same. That's a huge issue. Americans just do not understand Indochina. And if they were, they'd feel more comfortable with China and realize they can start working with China.
How do you think there can still be efforts made to repair or to mend the fabric of people-to-people relations? Many are disheartened by the series of actions recently the current administration took towards China.
Well, at lots of levels. For example, this is not people to people, but what if, for example, President Biden were to go to China and to spend some time going around China, not just to meet with President Xi and Zhongnanhai, but to go around the country, and go to various provinces and have stinky tofu with Chinese. I mean, just show that he's a real person.
You even designed the menu for him already.
That would go a long way. That would help a lot, Frank.
Putting jokes aside, for you and your service to your country, and certainly to promote the exchanges between China and the United States, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much. Being in China for years, Ambassador Baucus enjoyed doing the rounds in China, retracing Chinese history and encouraging more Americans to visit China, thus creating better understanding between the two countries. In the year 2016, I had the chance to interview him while Ambassador Baucus got down to the Jianchuan Museum cluster in Sichuan province for a history remembered on both shores during the World War II. Today, even with tensions rising, these Americans are still revered in China as the symbol of two great peoples working toward a common goal in war and peace. Let's take a look. This is Sculpture Garden, built in the museum in honor of those international friends who have been contributing to the cause in China to fight against the Japanese aggression during the Second World War. They're coming from all over the world. Many of them are from the United States originally. For example, Mr. Chennault, who is the head of the Flying Tigers pilots, and General Stilwell, who was then pretty much responsible for the Pacific theater of the Second World War. And I'm here waiting for the U.S. Ambassador, Ambassador Max Baucus, to hear his recounts of that part of the history and his personal experiences here in China. These are the people who have been contributing to the cause in the Pacific theater of the Second World War.
Right.
Many of them are Americans. I'm
Right.
sure you are familiar with some of their faces.
Yeah.
Mr. Chennault.
You can't forget his face. He has the most distinguished profile. He's so amazing. He was so determined. You know, people who succeed tend to be people who are very determined in life, and he was determined to succeed, especially with putting the Flying Tigers together.
Yes, indeed. And they did something wonderful to help China during the Second World War. And also General Stilwell.
Mm-hmm.
He even used to work in the embassy.
Yeah, he's quite a guy. Well, he worked hard. You fight for your country and be of the highest integrity, and you just don't suffer fools gladly, and you just work your very best for your country, and as he did during World War II. He has this wonderful expression. I think it's very important. It is that the higher you climb the flagpole, the more you expose your rear end.
Oh, yes,
That
indeed.
is, the higher you get up, the more people shoot at you, figuratively, and they give you a hard time. The two of them, you know, they had a little tension. They
had a little bit of tension over there.
But
yes.
they were here for the same cause, the same reason,
Yeah.
to deter Japanese.
That's really what I want to ask you, Mr. Ambassador. I mean, you were born almost at the time of the Second World War.
Yeah.
So how have these gentlemen's experiences and stories in China, and their debates as well, can inspire your work?
They were great men. You know, I can't begin to be great like these two, but I could be inspired by them, and all of us could be inspired by heroes. I would do what I can to help Americans, help Chinese understand each other, because the more we understand each other and the more we appreciate each other's efforts to help each other, the more it's going to help this relationship work really well.
While the ambassador went to visit some of the museum's collections, I also found this corner. Lines of glass walls featuring handprints collected from more than 5,000 senior-aged Chinese soldiers who fought all their ways against the Japanese aggression during the Second World War. According to Chinese official data, China's civilian and military casualties from 1937 to 1945 alone are 20 million dead and 15 million wounded. But eventually, China got Allied support. Among those Allied forces fighting alongside China, still the most well-known today are the Flying Tigers. It's a team of American pilots recruited under presidential authority and commanded by Claire Nee Chanel. They drove planes with shark-faced nose designs, among the most recognizable image of any individual combat unit of World War II. There are wreckage of the Flying Tigers. It was only possible after 3 years of preparation and enormous amount of research. That was recognized by Ambassador Baucus, standing in front of the walls with photos of the Flying Tiger heroes.
I want to give you this letter for all of your work in recovering remains and building these museums to honor something that's so important, so that we will always remember these people who work so much on behalf of us. And more importantly, the strong relationship between the United States and China and how our two companies work together to deter Japanese aggression. We are deeply indebted to you, deeply.
Ambassador Baucus, it's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
How was it when you look around this museum?
Frankly, I'm astounded. I'm stunned. The collection here exceeds my expectations.
And you heard about the 30 volunteers who climbed the high mountain glaciers in order to find the wreckages of the planes and also the bones of the pilots.
Yeah, it's stunning. It's inspirational. I guess some hunters in Tibet first sighted the wreckage and word passed on, and it took 3 years to prepare the expedition to recover the remains and bones and so forth. There may be more up there, I don't know, but recovering those increases the expectation that maybe there's more, and the legend lives on.
When China and U.S. together, they can really do something great, it seems.
Well, we certainly did back in World War II, no question about it, and we certainly can do it again. I think when the chips are down, that is when times get, if not a crisis, but where there's a real challenge, then people tend to work better together. The knowledge that we have many times worked in the United States and China so well together is a good reason to believe we can, and we will. There's no question in my mind. And
what is in your mind that you think could help us to prevent crisis from happening?
I think basically it's important for American people to understand Chinese people are just like American people. You know, same wishes, hopes, and desires, and Chinese people are the same. It also, I think, it would help if we were to travel more, if Americans would spend more time getting out of America and come over to China, see China, and to deflate some of the myths, you know, one way or another about China, and vice versa.
But there are certain kinds of sentiment in China who do not necessarily understand what is the real nature of this. Are they trying to corner China into a very small place? Do they really understand the rise of China?
Those are good questions. Those are questions that should be asked. And when they're asked, they should be examined very constructively and with deep efforts and efforts that listen to the other country, to listen to the other country's point of views, because China's not perfect, the United States is not perfect. Each country has its own culture, its own pride, and its own sense of nationalism, but we can't let that get in the way, because with each passing day, the world's getting smaller. We're getting closer and closer together. Actions that occur in one country are going to more likely affect the other country, both ways. When people start to think about it, not just knee-jerk, not just react to what somebody else says, but think about it, they'll realize that we will probably, not only probably, highly likely, we will get together in a positive way, because we have no alternative.
What do you think might be the biggest danger facing the two countries?
I think the biggest potential danger is failure of people in both countries to take the time and effort to learn about the other country. And it's partly because people tend to be a little bit comfortable. it's important for people to get out of their comfort zones. For Americans,
Not easy.
Not easy. It takes work. It takes effort. It's like all things in life. It takes work.
Have you tried?
I've done my very best every day, try to understand China better, understand better, and to explain to Chinese people as well as I can the American point of view, and ask lots of questions of the Chinese point of view, so I better understand.
You still have very busy schedule.
Oh, yeah, they're always
Mr. Ambassador, it's such a pleasure to have you over here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All the best.
And good luck.
Thank you so much.
Judy, how you?